Be honest with yourself. You open your eyes in the morning, and the first thing you do is reach for your phone. Not because there's something urgent, but because there's a hollow space inside that craves to be filled. You can't sit still for more than a few minutes without feeling restless. You can't endure a single moment of boredom without rushing to find something, anything, to entertain yourself. And you ask, is this just a habit, or is it freedom? In modern society, we're taught that freedom is the ability to choose whatever we want. But here's a deeper question. Do the things you want truly come from you, or are they just programmed reactions? You can't sit still for more than a few minutes without feeling restless. You can't endure a single moment of boredom without rushing to find something, anything, to entertain yourself. And you ask, is this just a habit, or is it freedom? In modern society, we're taught that freedom is the ability to choose whatever we want. But here's a deeper question. Do the things you want truly come from you, or are they just programmed reactions? 1. Pleasure is not evil until it becomes a prison. Joy, pleasure, comfort. When did these become the scapegoats in conversations about dependency and inner decay? The truth is that pleasure is not evil. On the contrary, it is a natural and necessary part of life. For thousands of years, pleasure has been a survival mechanism, a neurological reward system guiding us toward beneficial behaviors. Eating, bonding, connecting, exploring. Without dopamine, the neurotransmitter that generates satisfaction, humankind may never have evolved this far. The issue is not pleasure itself. The issue is the intensity and the way pleasure operates in modern society. When pleasure stops being a part of life, and instead becomes the center of life, we fall into a dangerous state, dependency. We no longer seek joy because it's good for us. We seek it because we can't bear the emptiness without it. Take a closer look at your day. You wake up, and the first thing you do is check your phone. While waiting for the bus, you can't just stand still. You need a video, a song, a story to fill the space. Even while working, a part of you secretly hopes for a notification to give yourself a break. Every moment of emptiness is immediately filled with pleasure. And just like that, pleasure, which once served you, now rules you. Each time you hit play, swipe, or search for something new, you trigger a temporary reward loop. Dopamine spike, right pointing arrow, satisfaction, right pointing arrow, crash, right pointing arrow, emptiness, right pointing arrow, repeat. And the cruel reality is, this cycle never ends. It just demands higher doses. In a society driven by speed, instant gratification, and fast rewards, pleasure is mass-produced, packaged, marketed, and implanted into your psyche as a form of personal freedom. But as Carl Jung once warned, man does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And when you're not awake enough to recognize what pleasure truly is, or when it begins to numb you, you slip into a form of voluntary slavery. When joy is no longer about genuine enjoyment, but about avoiding real emotion, it no longer serves life. It begins to sever you from yourself. And at that point, no chains are needed. You've locked yourself in a psychological prison built from dopamine. 2. Huxley's world and the truth unfolding around you. When people speak of dystopian futures, they often imagine George Orwell's 1984, a world where people are monitored by cameras, controlled by violence, and silenced by fear. But there is a far more subtle, far more frightening vision, the world imagined by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, a society where people don't need pressure to be controlled, because they have already surrendered willingly to comfort. Huxley didn't describe a future of blood and whips. He envisioned a society where people love their servitude, where resistance fades, thinking becomes obsolete, and pain is no longer felt, because every time a negative emotion arises, they reach for soma, a drug that induces bliss, without side effects, perfectly legal, perfectly effective, keeping the masses happy, obedient, and easy to manage. Sound far-fetched? Take a look around you. When you're bored, you can open TikTok with a single tap. When you feel lonely, you can swipe through Tinder for someone to talk to. When negativity arises, you can shop, eat, drink, binge watch, play games. Everything is within reach. No one forces you to consume, but everything is designed so you cannot resist consumption. Complex algorithms know you better than you know yourself. They know when you feel empty, when you're most easily triggered, and they offer you your next hit of digital soma, disguised as notifications, short videos, discount codes, or appealing visuals. What's terrifying is not that pleasure exists, but how pleasure has been weaponized to disable awareness. Just like in Huxley's world, we don't need to be oppressed, because we've lost even the desire for freedom. When your mind is constantly filled with entertainment, consumption, and effortless information, you have no time left for deep questions. And a society that doesn't question is the easiest kind of society to control. Huxley wrote, "There will be no need to ban books because no one will want to read them." Likewise, today, there's no need to stop you from thinking because you no longer feel that thinking is necessary. This world is no longer fiction. It's here, quietly, cleverly, packaged in the harmless gesture of a swipe. And if you are not truly awake, you will become just another character in this brave new world, never realizing what you've lost. Free, no one's forcing you, but you still can't stop. Why? No one's holding a gun to your head, saying, "Pick up your phone, now." No one's forcing you to scroll through social media for 3 hours a night, to binge short videos, or check your messages 15 times an hour. Everything you do, you choose to do. But here's the terrifying part. It's no longer a conscious choice. You can't stop, not because you lack willpower, but because you've been programmed. Since childhood, you were taught to avoid discomfort. Crying? Here, have a candy. Sad? Let's turn on the TV. Bored? Go out and play. No one taught you how to sit with your emotions, only how to numb them. And so, your mind developed a habit. Every time discomfort, anxiety, or emptiness arises, you reach for pleasure. This is what neuroscientists call the pleasure conditioning loop. You feel bored, right pointing arrow. You pick up your phone, right pointing arrow. Dopamine is released, right pointing arrow. You feel better, right pointing arrow. Your brain records, that worked. Do it again. Repeat this often enough, and your brain no longer sees it as a choice, but as a reflex. You're not in control anymore. You've been conditioned. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That statement applies even to your smallest habits. You believe you're free, but in truth, your mind is following instructions you've never questioned. And in the digital age, the programmers of your mind are no longer your parents or teachers, but algorithms, advertisers, social media platforms, and consumer industries. They don't need you to collapse. They only need you to never sit still, to avoid silence, to flee the void within. Because as long as you can't sit still, you will always reach for something to save you. And then you will buy, scroll, consume, repeat. This is the new form of slavery, slavery by pleasure dependency. No chains, no prisons, no torture. And yet, you can't escape. So the real question is no longer, why can't I stop? But rather, who taught me to fear stillness? And why was I never taught how to live without constant stimulation? You're not weak, you're simply not awake. And awakening doesn't begin with change. It begins with understanding why you're stuck. 4. When the system no longer needs to oppress you, because dopamine has already shackled you. In the past, controlling a person required prisons, chains, strict laws, and harsh punishments. But today, control has become far more subtle and far more effective. It no longer needs thought police or physical torture. It only needs one simple yet terrifyingly powerful tool: dopamine. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and motivation. Every time you receive a compliment, a new notification, or a small reward, dopamine is released, creating a brief moment of satisfaction. And your brain, operating with its primitive survival instincts, quickly learns, this feels good, repeat it. The system understands this perfectly. It doesn't force you to do anything. It makes you want to do it. It doesn't ban you from thinking. It just makes you disinterested in thinking. It doesn't oppress your freedom. It floods you with so much artificial freedom that you no longer remember where real freedom lives. Look at your daily life. You can't ride a bus without playing a podcast, texting, or watching a video. You can't eat without YouTube or TikTok playing just to make it more enjoyable. You can't sit through a few minutes of waiting without pulling out your phone to check if there's anything new. Each of these seemingly harmless behaviors is a link, a tiny link in a vast chain of dopamine dependence. And the system loves that chain, because a person who can't sit still who can't focus, who can't listen to themselves, is a person who is easily led, easily sold to, and easily soothed with shallow comfort. Huxley once warned, the perfect dictatorship would look like a democracy, but it would deprive people of their freedom unconsciously, to the point where they loved their servitude. This is no longer a dystopian prediction. It is reality. No one is forcing you to consume. You're doing it willingly, but that willingness is driven by countless dopamine loops you never knew existed, and once you're bound to pleasure, you lose your capacity to endure. You fear boredom, you fear loneliness, you fear emptiness. You want everything fast, fun, easy. And that very need is what makes you more fragile, distracted, and manipulable than ever. A truly intelligent system doesn't need you to bow your head. It only needs you to never raise it. It only needs you to stay just busy enough to never question. And if you don't wake up, you will live your entire life as a joyful servant, without ever knowing why you knelt in the first place. 5. Avoiding pain can make you weaker, not stronger. We live in a strange era, an age where any negative emotion is seen as a problem to be fixed immediately. Feeling sad? Watch a movie. Lonely? Scroll through social media. Rejected? Eat, shop, or date casually. Feeling lost? Just call it a bad day and try to cheer up. We no longer distinguish between the pain that needs healing and the pain that simply needs to be felt. And in avoiding all forms of pain, modern humans have become more fragile than ever. Aldous Huxley described this phenomenon vividly in Brave New World. In that society, every negative feeling is seen as abnormal, something to be erased instantly with a dose of soma, a drug with no side effects, only one effect, to make you feel okay. The result? A generation that could no longer suffer, but also could no longer understand itself. Now look at our own world. A minor failure is enough to make someone feel worthless. A broken relationship turns into a dramatic tragedy. One day of emptiness triggers a full-blown existential crisis. It's not because you're weak. It's because you were never taught that pain is a necessary part of growth. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Pain, if received with awareness, doesn't destroy you. It shapes you. Disappointment teaches resilience. Sadness fosters listening and empathy. Wounds force you to reassess your values. No one becomes stronger by making life easier. Strength is built by learning to live with difficulty without breaking down. But consumer culture and technology tell you the opposite. You shouldn't have to endure anything. They offer solutions to every inconvenience. Fast, simple, instantly gratifying, and each time you avoid pain through fleeting pleasure, you lose the chance to grow from within. When you avoid pain, you don't erase it, you bury it deeper, where it quietly runs your life through unconscious cracks. And one day, you wake up and realize, you can no longer live fully because you fear getting hurt. You can no longer trust because you fear failure. You can no longer persist because you fear fatigue. You're alive, but the life has gone out of you. To begin with this simple truth, you don't need to run from pain. You need to learn to walk through it, because the very place you once thought was your limit may in fact be the doorway to your deepest inner strength. 6. True freedom doesn't lie in pleasure, it lies in purpose. Modern society teaches you this mantra: be happy, but no one ever really defines what happiness means. And so the word quickly gets hijacked. It becomes, feel good, be comfortable, seek pleasure whenever possible, a like, a shopping spree, a new movie, a successful swipe right. You are not encouraged to live to build. You are encouraged to live to be entertained. But what happens after a long chain of short-lived pleasures? Emptiness, confusion, a vague sense of movement without direction. You begin to realize, no amount of pleasure can fill the void deep inside, a void that only meaning can touch. Viktor Frankl, the psychologist who survived Auschwitz, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." In the most brutal conditions, Frankl observed that the people who endured weren't the strongest physically, but those who had purpose. They didn't live to feel good. They lived because something greater than themselves gave them the will. Purpose does not arrive quickly. It's not short, not easy, and not as tempting as a short video or waiting message. It requires reflection. What am I really living for? What is worth enduring, striving, and pushing through for? What If I achieved it, would make this life feel meaningful? The answers may come slowly, but it's the search itself, not just the outcome, that brings you back to life. The difference between pleasure and purpose is depth. Pleasure is instant, personal, easy to satisfy, and easy to exhaust. Purpose is long-term, constructive, demanding, but leaves a lasting mark on your inner world. A person living by pleasure will always need something new, but a person living by purpose can endure what's old, if it leads somewhere that matters. Consumer society fears people of purpose because they're not easily manipulated. They don't need small rewards to stay motivated. They don't have to consume to feel valuable. They possess an inner foundation, something no algorithm can replicate. So no, freedom is not the ability to do whatever feels good. True freedom is knowing what's worth living for and being willing to endure the hardship to reach it. It's not about enjoying life. It's about owning your life. 7. To break free, you must relearn how to endure and how to think. Freedom doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from your willingness to endure discomfort long enough to truly look inward. Deep thinking, staying with your real emotions, living without dopamine hits every few minutes. None of this is easy, but if you want to reclaim control over your life, you must relearn two basic skills that society has quietly taken away from you. Enduring and thinking. Endurance means staying with your sadness without rushing to escape. It means being able to sit in silence without needing music. It means feeling bored without immediately grabbing your phone. It may sound insignificant, but in those very moments, you begin to open space to truly face yourself. Don't mistake this for asceticism. This is not about giving up joy, entertainment, or pleasure. It's about restoring the right order. Joy is a reward for effort, not a remedy for every discomfort. And thinking is not a reflex. Thinking is the courage to pause and ask, why'd I open my phone every time I feel bored? Who benefits when I can't sit still? If I weren't being pulled into consumption, what would I spend my time on instead? Real thinking does not happen when you're surrounded by noise, visuals, notifications, and busy schedules. It only happens when you create space. And to create space, you must overcome the greatest fear of our time, the fear of emptiness. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." But to look inside, you must face the things you've long avoided. You must grow comfortable with stillness, with questions that have no instant answers, with feelings of uncertainty. And if you can move through that, you'll discover something extraordinary. You can begin to master your own mind. This journey doesn't require grand declarations. It can begin with something as simple as sitting still for 10 minutes a day. No screen, no sound, just you and your thoughts. It can begin by choosing not to react the moment boredom, sadness, or anxiety arises, but instead pausing, acknowledging the feeling, questioning it, and simply staying with it for a while. That's when resilience begins. That's when the cycle of control slowly shifts from the system back into your hands, and in that moment, you stop living just to react. You begin to live with intention. 8. Awakening makes you a threat to the sleeping masses. You've begun to awaken. You no longer scroll your phone mindlessly for hours. You realize that instant pleasures no longer bring the feeling of truly being alive. You start asking, does this really matter? Am I escaping, or am I living? But strangely, when you change, not everyone celebrates. In fact, some may find you weird, cold, distant, or even arrogant. Why? Because your awakening is a mirror. It reflects back what others don't want to face in themselves. The fear of abandonment that makes them crave constant company. The addiction to pleasure that's robbed them of the ability to be alone. The unhealed wound. If you've read this far, something within you has already begun to flashy, but it is unmistakably real. You're starting to realize that the world around you is not just a backdrop for life. It's a system designed to shape your behavior. Every notification, every short video, and every ad share a common goal: to pull you away from yourself, to make sure you never pause long enough, never feel empty enough, to ask a truly important question. And now, you begin to understand, the key is not about detoxing from devices or limiting screen time. Those are just surface-level actions. The root lies in whether you have the courage to sit with your sadness without rushing to extinguish it, stay with boredom without immediately seeking an exit, look directly into the raw landscape of your mind, unfiltered by dopamine or comfort-driven reflexes. Awakening always comes with a season of solitude. When you stop chasing cheap pleasure, you stop fitting in with the crowd. When you begin to ask questions, you feel like a stranger in a world that only wants fast answers. But that isn't losing your way, it's finding your way back, and you'll start to see, true freedom isn't in the right to consume whatever you want, it's in the right to refuse what no longer serves you. Not in mastering life according to someone else's success metrics, but in becoming yourself with full awareness, without needing permission. This path isn't easy, but if you've ever felt empty amid countless pleasures, if you've ever grown tired of keeping yourself endlessly busy, if you've ever whispered to yourself, "Is there something deeper?" then you've already taken your first step. So now, the final question is no longer, "Am I free?" but rather, "Do I have the courage to reclaim that freedom with my own hands and hold on to it?"